Welcome to Shiloh Machshava on the daf we're holding in Zevachim daf Kuf Yud Ches. The Gemara in this daf speaks about the Mila of Mishkan Shiloh. And the Gemara explains the Mishkan Shiloh, the Mila is that Kodshim ne'echolim b'chol haroyeh. You're able to eat Kodshim everywhere you see Mishkan Shiloh. You don't have to be inside a location like we have in Yerushalayim. You have to be in the walls. Any place that sees Mishkan Shiloh can eat the Kodshim Kalim. And the Gemara Amud Beis explains that Mishkan Shiloh was in the place of Yosef, and Yosef did not allow his eyes to be seeing and to be enjoying something that doesn't belong to him. So because he controlled his eyes, so that's why anybody who sees Kol HaRoyeh, anybody who sees Shiloh can come and eat Kodshim. The Maharal Kedusha Goddess explains that when Yosef is shoylet al einov, he's controlling his eyes, that makes him davar nivdol, meaning he is separating himself from this world. That shows Kedusha and prisha min hachomri. It shows Kedusha removing himself from the physicality of the world. Someone who connects to such Kedusha, so he has no limitations, because Kedusha has no limitations. So when Yosef is shoylet al einov, that means he's separating himself from the desires of this world. He connects the big mile of Nivdol, which has no limitation and spreads all over B'chol Haroyeh. And the Avnei Nezer and the Sefer Ne'ois Deshet explains it a little bit more. Why do we need to have a wall in Yerushalayim to separate and not allow the Kodshim Kalim to go out? You need to have a wall because there's chitzonim, there's koiches of tumah, of bad, that are trying to penetrate the place of Kedusha. So you need to have something to guard the Kedusha. You need to have something which will be a mechitza, which will be a protection to the Kedusha. That's why I need to have a wall. But Yosef HaTzadik, which was in the tumah and was able to overcome the challenges of the bad, of the tumah, of the taivas that we have, Eshes Pratifar, he did not allow himself to connect to the bad. So his reward is he doesn't need the protection. He doesn't need to have that wall around him. Because he did not allow himself to be nimshach to the bad around him, so he could be among the bad and they won't affect him. So Mishkan Shiloh doesn't need the wall, doesn't need that protection. And he adds that's why Shiloh is called Menucha, as we'll see in the next daf, because Menucha is when you can relax and not be worried about the enemies around you. He says you can walk in the market and not be worried about the tumor around you. But this all leads to the question which the Maharal himself points out. And the question is, if Shiloh is so great, if Yosef HaTzadik was able to accomplish so much, so why is Shiloh less of Kedusha than Beis Olam in the Beis HaMikdash? Why is Shiloh only a temporary Kedusha? Why does it not last forever? The Shem Shmuel brings this question. He says, really, it seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, Shiloh is greater because Kodshim ne'echolim b'chol haroyeh. On the other hand, it's only a temporary Kedusha. So how do we look at Shiloh? So says the Shem Shmuel, Dover niflo ad le'me'oid. He says, what is the idea of the Mishkan and Beis HaMikdash? Is to bring the Shechina to the Tachtoinim, to bring down the Shechina to come to this world. This we once mentioned, the idea of the Shiva Simei Miluim is to bring the Shechina from the Shiva Rikim until it comes down to the world. Now, though the Mishkan, the Midbar, already brought Shechina to the Tachtoinim, but still, the Mishkan, when Ham Yisrael is in the Midbar, when they are surrounded by Hanonei HaKovit, when they're surrounded Begil Shechina, the Shechina is not completely down here in the world. It's in a place which is very elevated. Says the Shem Shmuel, where does that reflect itself? That the Mishkan itself was all the materials of the Mishkan came from the Chai and the Tzemach, from animals and from plants. The majority came from animals, the Uriyos, and you had also what's called the Sheish. That came from a plant. The only inanimate item that you had in the Mishkan was the Adonim. The Adonim was the base of the Kodshim, of the big beams. That's the only thing that came from the Daimim, from metal. So that reflects the idea that the Shechina comes down, it's Chal on human beings, it's Chal on Semeach, it's Chal on Chai, but it's not Chal so much on the Daimim. It didn't come down completely to the Tachtoinim. When you come to Shiloh, Shiloh is already, the walls of Shiloh, says the Gemara in our daf and Amud Aleph, the walls are made out of avonim, they're made out of stone. but the ceiling is still made out of ureus, is still made out of the material of the chai, coming from the hides of the animal. And that reflects the idea that the Shekhinah is coming a little bit more to Tachtonim. Because already you have the walls of the Shiloh made out of inanimate item from the stone. Beis HaMikdash is kuloi made out of stone. The walls and the ceiling. Telling me that now the Shekhinah came mamish to Tachtonim, to the inanimate items. It's already coming down to the bottom, to this world. And that is the purpose of Beis HaMikdash, of the Shekhinah coming down to Tachtonim. So explains the Shem Shmuel Nifla B'Yoser. He says like this: yes, Shiloh has more Kedusha. Kedusha spreads around. But this Kedusha spreads around because it was not chal down here in the bottom. It didn't come yet to the world fully. When the Kedusha did not come yet down to Tachtonim, it has the ability to spread all around. Because it's not fully connected down to this world. It's a higher Kedusha, but it has also the Chisaron that's not fully in the world. When it comes to Beis HaMikdash, that's where the Kedusha came to Tachtonim. The Kedusha comes down to, in a certain sense, it needs to be more protected, as the Avnei Nezer explained. So it's more of the Taklis, and that's why it's a Kedusha that remains forever, but you can't eat B'chol Aroi. You can add to this, where Reb Tzaddik HaKohen always speaks about the difference between Yosef and Yehuda, is Yosef is the tzaddik, he does everything right. Yehuda is the one who did something wrong, but he's the Baal Tshuva that corrected it. And the tachlis of the world is not to have only tzaddikim, that's Mashiach ben Yosef, but to get the Mashiach ben David, who's going to take the whole world and change him to do tshuva. Meaning the Kedusha will come down more to the Tachtonim. The Mishkan Shiloh belongs to Yosef, and the Chelek of Yosef. The Kedusha spreads all over, but it belongs only to tzaddikim. But Beis HaMikdash, which is built in Yerushalayim, where do you eat Kodshim Kalim? In Chelek of Yehuda. That is Kedusha that goes more Tachtonim to the Baal Tshuva, but it's contained, because when the more it goes down, the more protections it needs. Torim Nifloim Ad Lemoid. Anyone who wants to join or sponsor the Shor Machshava Shurim, please email shormachshava@gmail.com.